Storytime with Quefish, Effortless Intimacy, Chapter 2. Dessert and Sweetness. Summary. Temptations. But who is tempting who? Crowley spent supper and dessert watching Aziraphale eat. Crowley ate, of course, and could even be said to enjoy foods on occasion, but he certainly didn't crave and immerse himself in the experience of eating as Aziraphale did. Thus he was always finished long before the angel's second bite had been swallowed. Not that he minded at all. The conversations were usually engaging in some way, and it gave him the excuse to just watch the angel. The way he looked at the food first, making sure whatever bite he chose was going to be perfectly balanced in flavor and texture. The careful use of his cutlery, the way his tongue came out as he brought the bite toward his mouth. There was one thing that amused Crowley more than anything else while eating with Aziraphale. For all of his meticulous table manners and careful consideration to savoring whatever he was eating, there was one habit that just didn't go with the rest of the scene. Aziraphale would talk with food in his mouth. Not obscenely. He was careful enough to keep it in his cheek. Nevertheless, it was an odd dichotomy to the rest of the fastidious attention given to his manners. It was one of those small quirks that made him smile no matter where he was when he remembered it. "Have you been listening to a word I've said?" Aziraphale was lightly dabbing his lips with a napkin, trying to look very put out, but he had barely been paying attention to his words himself. Sorry, No, I wasn't." Crowley looked annoyed with himself that he had been caught, but also that he really didn't know what the topic had been. He was used to at least having some idea, even when his thoughts drifted, of what was happening around him. This time had been different somehow. "That's all right. I've finished anyway. Shall we be off then?" Crowley nodded at Aziraphale's suggestion, his eyebrows still crunched together, and they left to walk back to the bookshop. Aziraphale was nervous, still. He had been talking about anything that passed his mind, not really honing in on any topic. He had no reason to think Crowley would be upset about what he wanted, of course, but his reaction overall was still a mystery. Aziraphale wondered if perhaps he was preoccupied with some other sort of evil plan, or maybe had noticed how nervous he was. They made the short walk back to the bookshop, and once inside, headed to the back room. Crowley took up residence on the sofa, lounging to the side over one of the arms, as Aziraphale made himself some cocoa. His sunglasses came off, Aziraphale's rule, and placed on a nearby table. "I didn't mean to ignore you, Angel." A light chuckle preceded Aziraphale into the room carrying his mug. "I know you didn't. It's all right. I understand sometimes the mind wanders. One errant word can cause all manner of distraction." He placed the mug on the table closest to him and sat on the sofa, angled towards the demon, who looked as though he had simply been poured into his place on top of the cushions. "Up you get." He tapped the demon's knee, gesturing to his lap, and Crowley complied, a small smirk pulling the corners of his mouth up as his knee was covered by Aziraphale's hand. "Can't wait to get your hands on me, Angel. I understand, of course." He chuckled before noticing how Aziraphale froze, his eyes and hand still on Crowley's knee, but definitely like a deer in headlamps. Crowley was in the process of putting together an apology sentence in his head when Aziraphale's hand moved from his knee to just below his knee and stopped, giving a small squeeze. He refused to blink as he watched a gentle pink spread over Aziraphale's cheeks as he wet his lips before drawing in breath. The angel looked at his sofa partner out of the corner of his eye, still lightly holding that small space between the knee and the calf proper. "You know, while I do look forward to reclining with you like this, it wasn't quite my hands I was thinking about." His eyes darted back to the demon's knee, taking a breath. Crowley wasn't sure he'd ever been so still in his long existence, both intrigued and not wanting to spook him. He had no idea how long he waited for Aziraphale to continue, but he did somehow notice that the cocoa mug behind him had stopped steaming some minutes ago. He was about to say something when Aziraphale turned his head to look him in the eyes, seeming to have made a decision about something. His eyes were clear, but a little too open, his eyebrows a little too pinched in the middle by nerves or confusion. So softly, a human in the same room wouldn't have heard it. He finally spoke. Crowley, I am simply joyous over the time we spent together. However, I found myself thinking of that's not right. I have found myself wanting very much to kiss you. Crowley took that moment to blink, sure that when his eyes opened, this wouldn't actually be happening like this. He took a breath, searching Aziraphale's face to make sure he wasn't putting him on. Not that he truly believed that the angel ever would, but there was a first time for everything, right? He had wanted that himself. But after the gentle admonishment in the 60s, but definitely not a no, he reminded himself. And despite being a demon, he had decided that when it came to Aziraphale, patience was a virtue. He made a quick decision as he looked into Aziraphale's eyes where no hint of mirth or malice lay, and gracefully moved closer while removing his legs from the angel's lap. His arm slid across the back of the sofa until his hand rested on the angel's far shoulder. Aziraphale believed for a moment, as Crowley moved his legs away, that this was a step too far, but still waited for him to say something. He relaxed somewhat and felt a smile crossing his face as Crowley came closer, and he reached out, placing his hand on the demon's cheek, his thumb tracing the line of his jaw for a moment. He leaned in until their noses almost touched, feeling Crowley's breath upon his lips. May I assume, my dear, that my want is mutual? Crowley gave a small sound, almost a scoff, and replied, What kind of question is that? He tilted his head into Aziraphale's palm and moved forward until their lips touched. He heard a small "oh," and when he pulled back and looking, he heard a small "oh" when he pulled back, and looking at Aziraphale's face, couldn't help a small chuckle. The angel's face was pink, eyes closed, and his lips were slightly parted in a smile. You know, if I still cared about that kind of thing, I'd be reporting this to head office. Can you imagine the commendation I'd get for tempting an angel? He smirked as the angel in question opened his eyes. Well, perhaps I would have reported that I was successfully working on turning a demon back to the light. Aziraphale's eyes bright with happiness and humor. Nah, your lot don't care about that. Irredeemable we all are, Crowley replied. Besides, I think to submit a proper report, tell about a truly tempted angel, it would take more than just one kiss. Too right, Aziraphale agreed. He brought his lips back to the demon's, laying more kisses on top of the first. I suppose we should keep on. He drew back a moment, looking at Crowley's not quite closed eyes, his lips still drawn up for more kisses. Aziraphale indulged in him again, feeling bolder and more full of warmth with every kiss. Pulling away, laying a kiss on Crowley's cheek and jawline before coming back to his lips. You know, I believe. Shut up, Angel. Crowley brought his hand from Aziraphale's shoulder to the back of his head and waited for his inevitable attempt to get another word in. When he did, Crowley quickly brought his tongue out and licked at the angel's lips. He watched Aziraphale's eyes widen and felt, more than heard him breathe, another "oh." Satisfied that the angel would be quiet and just let them enjoy the moment, he started kissing him again. Genuinely surprised when his move was copied on him, only the tongue then reaching into his mouth. He let out a small growl in the back of his throat as he felt the angel thoroughly explore. Feeling his tongue tracing his teeth, then lightly tickling the soft bits just behind his teeth, Crowley couldn't help gently nipping Aziraphale's bottom lip when he withdrew, hoping and succeeding in hearing that little "oh" again. Aziraphale leaned back just enough to look at Crowley's face. The demon looked satisfied, engaged, and wanting more. The angel was sure he looked much the same. He slid his hand from Crowley's cheek to his neck, his thumb lightly feeling his Adam's apple. One of the first temptations. Yours, I believe, was the apple. Only fitting that your own apple is still so tempting. As Crowley tried to focus enough to decipher what the angel was talking about, the angel dipped his head and placed a kiss on the small bump where his thumb had just been. Crowley decided that thinking didn't really matter, as long as Aziraphale continued moving his mouth over his throat. Crowley's hands came around to hold him closer, his eyes almost crossing when he felt Aziraphale's tongue lick his Adam's apple before laying another kiss on it and leaning up again to lay more kisses on his lips. Aziraphale hummed into the last kiss as he came away to properly look at Crowley. Crowley tried to lean in for another kiss, but the angel angled him toward his cheek instead. The demon certainly didn't let out an unbecoming whine at this, nor did he pout, which caused the angel to smile indulgently and give him one more small kiss before pulling Crowley gently into his arms, cradling his head near his heart. Don't whine, Crowley. It doesn't suit you. And don't worry, there will definitely be more kissing in the future. Crowley grumbled half-heartedly and nuzzled into Aziraphale's chest. Fine. Is it the future yet? The angel let out a laugh and squeezed the demon in his arms. I love spending all manner of time with you, my dear. It can't all be kissing. Sure it could. Oh, I'm sure that would get rather boring for you, wouldn't it? No mischief, only indulging? Crowley let his voice go a bit deeper and more serious. No, it wouldn't, and proceeded to show the angel what throat kisses felt like. He could have fed on the little O that came out of Aziraphale's lips, slightly deeper and definitely breathier than the ones before it. He hummed as he felt arms go around him and gave a happy smirk. Temptation accomplished? Aziraphale wished he had words at that moment, but he didn't. Perhaps he was a bit hasty with stopping the kissing for the evening after all. The cocoa that hadn't even been sipped was completely cold by the time the two agreed that the kissing could stop for the night. That's the end of chapter 2.